Appreciate the opportunity to be back here in Fort Worth, and I want to thank the council for giving the opportunity to speak here today. And we originally came here. I hadn't planned on giving this talk, but I've been working on an economic plan for the past year, and tinkering around with it. And about 10 days ago, we were able to finally nail it down. And so I thought, well, what a better way to go out and talk about how to make America competitive in a world environment where I think we are increasingly uncompetitive than at a World Affairs Council. And so we're going to share with you. We introduced the bill. I introduced the concept this morning in the Wall Street Journal. In fact, I saw someone had cut out the article in the Journal today and an op-ed on the editorial page, and I wanted to lay out the details here today. And we'll be doing radio and TV throughout the rest of the afternoon and evening, so hopefully you'll get a chance to hear me or see me on Sean Hannity and Glenn Beck and some of the other shows that I'll be doing this afternoon. I'll be on Cavuto this afternoon on Fox from here in Dallas, so you get a chance to hear some of the follow-up. But I want to share the whole plan with you today and sort of lay out a reason for this plan and what the whole motivation. My whole motivation is for laying out this economic vision for our country. It was mentioned, or Dana mentioned earlier, that I wrote a book last year called Blue Collar Conservative. You can get a copy of it in the back. But that was in part a reflection from my campaign in 2012 and what I learned on the road and the issues that we talked about back then, and sort of a little bit of a policy prescription for the future. But this gets into more nitty-gritty detail as to exactly what we're going to put forward. But let me first share with you, why. Why we need this new vision for this country. And I think we can all start out with the reality. And this is it's a sad reality. I never thought I'd actually say these words, which is, America has lost hope. And if you look at the survey data now, you have the majority of Americans who think that their life is not going to be better in the future. So personally, they don't believe that their future looks good. Secondly, now a majority of Americans don't think their children are going to do as well as they are, which is new in America. And third, and this is one you're most familiar with, that most Americans are pessimistic about the future of our country. They don't think America's days are necessarily brightest days are ahead. That is a very pessimistic America. It may result in why you see some of the polls that you have today and some of the people who are leading in elections. It's amount of frustration that they aren't going to do well, their kids aren't going to do well, and overall the country isn't going to do very well. And that isn't America that I grew up in, and it's not an America that I think we really recognize or certainly want. But it is where Americans are today, and let's be honest, it's not probably the people in this room who feel that way. The fact of the matter is that a whole segment of America has done very, very well over the last 7 or 8 years under Barack Obama, and frankly, maybe even a little longer than that. And there's been a whole bunch of Americans out there who don't think that they're getting ahead. And you hear this separation that's happening in America. Some people call it the wealth gap, some people call it a whole variety of different things, hollowing out of the middle of America. But the reality is that people are feeling it. And when people feel that, they react a certain way. And what I see in the reaction is that we've seen much more tendency to rely on government to try to make up the difference. Here's the problem. Government's the one that's created the problem. But we have two parties. One party who goes out and talks about these issues all the time, talks about the problems facing those, shows compassion, and has programs that make it worse. Now, I don't think they deliberately want to make it worse, but they do. These programs that are intended to help actually cause more problems. And those who have the right answers, if you think about it, when I was a kid, 1 in 5 people around the world were in poverty. I'm talking about living under $1 a day. That was what was defined as abject poverty. Today, thanks to the spread of our ideas, free enterprise, capitalism, and more political freedom, only 1 in 20 people in the world. So our ideas, in fact, if you look at America, even under this president, we promote those ideals around the world. We don't promote them anymore within our own country. We preach but we don't practice what we preach. And so if you look at the people in America, you have who are struggling. You have the poor, and the poor feel trapped by government programs, by programs that are meant to help. But what happens is they create a barrier to success. And most people who are, if you talk to them, don't see a way out. You have workers whose wages have flatlined, good paying jobs have moved overseas, and they don't see a way up. And then you have small businesses who are thwarted by government regulation and oppressive taxes, and they don't see a way in to be successful in the business world today. So whether it's the poor, or whether it's working Americans, or whether it's the small entrepreneur, all of those, if you look at America, are feeling frustrated. Republicans and conservatives have done a very good job of identifying with that last group. We've done a very good job of identifying with the plight of the small business person. And as we all know, small business in America isn't small. Small business in America is big because it's one of the great job creators in America. In fact, has been for a long, long time. And one of the reasons we've had so much trouble in creating jobs and good paying jobs is because we have thwarted small businesses. Republicans have been great at talking about that. But we've been very lacking in talking about American workers and the poor in America, and laying out a vision that shows that we care. In the last election, the second biggest reason that people gave for voting for president in the 2012 election, in the general election, was they wanted to know whether the person running for president cared about them. 23% of the electorate said that was their most important issue. I think 25% were concerned about jobs and the economy. But the second most important issue in the last election was, does he care about people like me? Predominantly workers and the poor who cared about that issue. And our candidate for president, my candidate for president, Mitt Romney, got 19% of those votes. There's a gap. And the gap is that I believe we have the policies to help, but we don't show any kind of connection with the people that are helped the most by it, in part because we never talk about it. So today I'm going to lay out a vision and talk about it, yes, in the context of what we're going to do, facts and figures, if you will, with our policies, but I'm also going to talk about it in more general themes. What I want to accomplish in this economic plan is, first and foremost, we're going to focus on work and the dignity of work, all work. In America, you ask the question, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Work and living are tied together. But we've separated that increasingly in America. And when you separate someone from work, you separate them from something that's incredibly valuable, earned success. Earned success. The feeling of happiness that comes with accomplishment, with providing for yourself and your family. We are alienating people all over America with that inherent dignity of work and earning your success, no matter what that earning is. We have elites in our culture that talk about, oh, you have to go to college, you have to have this kind of job. Every job is valuable. Every job has dignity and worth and value. We need to get back to that basic concept of having work as a central part of everyone's life in America, if possible. And that is going to be one of the key elements of our plan. Secondly, I talk about this all the time. You can't have a healthy economy without a healthy family. Families are essential. The Greek word oikos is the root of the word economy. And oikos means home. The first economy is the home. The first hospital is the home. The first school is the home. The first church is the home. The first everything in America is the home. And as we all know, the home in America is breaking down. We're reaching almost 50% of children in America being born out of wedlock. And that number continues to increase. And if you're in a poor community, the number is 60, 70, maybe even as high as 80%. We're not going to be successful as Americans unless we do more as a country to strengthen that family unit and give children their birthright to be raised by their natural mother and natural father in a loving home. And you can say, what can government do about it? I can tell you what government's done about it. Because government has had a hand in the last 50 years of that breakdown. Daniel Patrick Moynihan in the late 1960s talked about the crisis in the black family and how this would be the end of opportunity in the black family. In the 1960s, as a liberal Democrat, when the out-of-wedlock birth rate was 25%, it's now 75%. It's just the opposite. And we continue to do what? Nothing. Let's be honest, we do nothing. We don't even talk about it anymore because it's politically incorrect to do so, because you might offend somebody by talking about the problem that we have, and even couching it as a problem. Because, of course, all families are the same and it doesn't matter. Well, it may not matter for the individual, but it certainly matters for the children. Just look at the numbers. And third, we need to put free back in free enterprise. We need to create the opportunity for businesses to be able to rise instead of what we've done here in America, which really, I always find this sort of funny that you look at the Republican Party seems the party of business, and the Democratic Party the party of the little guy. But if you look at the reality, the folks who have done exceptionally well under Democratic presidencies are big businesses. Why? Because the more regulation you heap onto the business sector, the more competitive bigger businesses are versus small. Because the little guy simply doesn't have the ability and the staff to be able to keep up with this mountain of red tape that's being thrown on by Washington, and encouraged, I would argue, by the big business community. Why? Because it's a competitive advantage for them. And so putting free back in free enterprise is absolutely essential to do it. So how do we do that? We have a lot of folks who have introduced tax plans who are running for president, and I call them tinkerers with the tax code. Tinkerers because they have, well, the same rate structure, and they play around with this and play around with that, all still leaving the Internal Revenue Code intact. All leaving the IRS to continue to do what it's been doing here recently, which is not just oppressive, but in many cases corrupt, and the way they deal with taxpayers here in America. My plan is the first and only truly flat tax. Our plan will stop tinkering once and for all and explode the code. And that's our objective, to get rid of the tax code, all 1 million words of it, all 4 million words of tax code and regulations drafted pursuant to that tax code. That's right, 4 million words in the Internal Revenue Code and its regulation. Just to give you a comparison, there are 788,000 words in the King James Version of the Bible. Now, if Jesus Christ and can lay out the future for all mankind in less than 1 million words, you think we should be able to do that, collect revenue here in America. But we simply can't. And I think tinkering with it is a failure. We have to explode it. So what are we going to do? First, we go to a single rate for everybody on all income. This is a revolutionary concept, but a concept that strikes at the heart of fairness and growth. Fairness in that no matter what form of income you take, you're going to be taxed at the same level. So we hear things about, that Warren Buffett, because he takes money in capital gains as opposed to salary, pays less money and less taxes than his secretary does. We heard about carried interest and all of these other things that are manipulations of the tax code. No more. If you receive your taxes if you receive your income as capital gains, you're taxed at 20%. If you receive it as ordinary income, you're taxed at 20%. Corporations, 20%. Interest, 20%. Dividends, 20%. All income taxed at the exact same level, 20%. That's why we call this plan a 2020 clear vision for America. It's very simple, very direct. And it can't be more simple. Let's take the corporate tax code. The corporate tax code is, again, a very complex code with lots of exceptions and shelters and special interest provisions, tax breaks and the like. All of them go away. Not some of them, all of them. We change it to a code that is a 20% flat tax, and all expense, everything that is spent by the company in its business can be expensed. Everything. Capital, equipment, as well as the things that are expensed today. No more depreciation schedules. No more amortization schedules. A simple, in a sense, net profits tax. The one proviso is we are not going to allow for the deductibility of interest costs. We're not going to encourage one form of support for the corporate entity equity over another debt. And so it's a very simple, fair, flat tax code which makes us competitive with the rest of the world. In fact, there are only two countries right now that have a higher tax rate than us. One is, I think both of them are in Africa, and both of them are third world countries. But as far as developed countries, we are by far the highest tax rate, corporate tax rate. We will now be below average. We will now be, in a word, competitive. And with the simple expensing with respect to manufacturing, I announced my campaign from a factory floor in Western Pennsylvania. And I said one of the keys for us in putting people back to work, giving people the dignity that comes with work, is for us to be, again, the #1 manufacturing country in the world. And we can do that if we structure our economy in a way that can be competitive. One is our tax code. This will make us competitive with every country in the world that we have to do business against when it comes to our tax code. Secondly, ordinary income, individual taxes. Again, very simple, 20% on all income. 20% interest, 20% dividends, 20% on ordinary or earned income. You say, well, wait a minute, that means that maybe lower income people are going to be paying more in taxes. No, we're going to provide a $2,750 tax credit. $2,750 tax credit per person. So if you extrapolate that out, that's about a $14,000 deduction, if you will, in a 20% tax code world. So what we do is, for the first $2,750 you have to pay in taxes, you don't have to pay it. And in fact, it's refundable. So if you actually have a family of 4, let's take me, I'm a family of 9, and you have a family of 9, it's about a $25,000 tax credit in my family. So the first $25,000 that I earn in taxes, that I'd have to pay in taxes, I wouldn't have to pay. And if I don't make enough money, then you would have it refundable. So you would have that part of that money actually paid to you. So it provides a very strong pro-family, because we treat children the same as adults. Everybody gets a tax credit that's $2,750. The only additional things that we allow is number one, a child tax credit, making this code even more robustly supports families in America, and this tax plan will do that. 2 deductions that we leave in place, just 2. One is on home interest, but we cap it at $25,000 a year. So no support for either very, very big leveraged homes or second or third homes. But we provide support for the vast majority of homeowners in America to be able to provide to be able to get income, a tax break for their house. And secondly, charitable deductions. Unlike the current charitable deduction, which is only available if you itemize, well, there is no itemization. There's no non-itemizers or itemizers. Everybody's treated the same in the tax code. And so you can deduct, no matter what your income, you can deduct charitable gifts from your income. So again, supporting what I believe is essential, which is, I think it was George Bush who called them this armies of compassion, nonprofit institutions, churches, and other nonprofits that go out and make a difference in their community, having that support from everybody, and that support being recognized in the federal tax code. So again, very simple. No other deductions, no other credits, everything else is very, very simple. And obviously very pro-growth, because we're liberating people For the most you're going to be taxed on a dollar is 20 cents on a dollar. That is a tremendous advantage over the current tax code, which for small businesses, particularly S corporations that pay at the personal rate, the top rate is 39.5%. We've now cut that in half for small businesses in America. A tremendous engine of growth focused on small businesses in America. And, excuse me. Third, capital gains, 20%. Again, no difference than today, but it's treated, that income is treated the same as all other income. This plan, according to the Tax Foundation, which is sort of the gold standard in analyzing plans, this plan will create 3.1 million new jobs above what they call the baseline. So just to give you an idea, this plan will create over the next 10 years, given what is projected, 19 million jobs. So 3.1 million above the level. It will do so by increasing the size of the economy by 29% more than what it is scheduled to increase over the next 10 years, and will increase wages by almost 7.5% above what, again, the scheduled growth is supposed to be. So you'd say, well, what's this going to cost? How much money is it going to cost? If you look at the model the Tax Foundation has laid out, the cost of this program over 10 years is $1.1 trillion. So, see, some may say, well, you're going to increase the deficit by $1.1 trillion. Well, yes and no. Because in our tax plan, we eliminate all the Obamacare taxes. The Medicare tax, the medical device tax, all of these taxes that were put in place, the Cadillac plaque, everything that the Obamacare puts in, we eliminate. In conjunction with this, and I'm not going to lay out the details of this today, our plan in this tax bill is to repeal Obamacare. By repealing Obamacare and all of the subsidies and cost of Obamacare, we've already repealed the taxes. If we repealed the cost, that saves $1.7 trillion. So this actually raises the revenue by about $600 billion over 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, the budget is in surplus over what it would have been under the current law. So again, this is the only plan that gets growth. And by the way, let me add that the Congressional Budget Office says if you repeal Obamacare, you get another 0.7 more growth. You add that to the 1% additional growth we get a year, because I said it's a 10% growth over 10 years. We had 1% a year in growth. That would be from 2.3, which is the baseline now, to 3.3. Add 0.7, which Obamacare gets you a year. We're now at 4% growth, which is exactly where everyone would like to see. Why? Because it is the norm of a post-recovery period in America. Post-recovery periods since the Second World War have averaged 4%. This one has been around 2%. This plan will put us on a 4% growth pattern and finally begin to do something about stabilizing the budget deficit just by doing the tax part in Obamacare alone. There's a lot more that I want to do on the economic front when it comes to reducing the size of government that will even reduce the deficit and bring us into balance even more. So that's the plan in a nutshell. It is a plan that will increase growth from the current 2.3 to 4 points, that will reduce the deficit over a period of 10 years and put us on a path to fiscal responsibility. And it will create opportunities for America to do what I pledged I would do when I announced on a factory floor. It puts us in a position to be the #1 competitor now to the rest of the world in making things here in this country. I have a plan that goes into more detail about what we need to do on manufacturing. For example, one of the things that is part of this economic plan is to repeal every single Obama regulation, executive order, and administrative rule that he's put in place since he's been president that cost the American economy over $100 million a year. And that is a very long list of regulations. And here's the beauty of what President Obama has done. He says that if the Congress doesn't go along, I'll put my pen and I'll do it myself. And he did. He's probably abused that power more than any other president. The beauty of that is that the next president can undo those with one stroke of a pen. So by not getting the Congress to actually pass legislation, he allows the next president the ability to go in and undo everything he's done. Everything from immigration to Obamacare to a whole host of other things that he has changed, laws that he has changed, environmental regulations that he has changed with the stroke of a pen. And I will do so. And then I'll push for a piece of legislation that says that any regulation that a president adopts pursuant to a statute must be approved by the Congress if it costs more than $100 million a year to the economy. Currently, the law says that any regulation of that sort has to be disapproved by the Congress. So what happens is it's a lot easier to block something from happening than it is to affirmatively pass it. It's hard to pass bills, as we now see in the House and Senate. And so if every regulation is now going to be required to be approved by Congress, it will put some real constraint on the president abusing his authority. One of the things I hear, and I talk to people all the time, how is it that the president is doing what he's doing? It's because there's no mechanism in place for the Congress to check him. This bill will do just that. We have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, with this election to be able to elect somebody who not only has a strong vision that will get this economy going, which I believe this does, but here's the most important thing: someone who can actually pass it. You know, you'll hear a lot of other plans out there, and some of them, in my opinion, are irresponsible. Donald Trump and Bobby Jindal both offered plans that could cost, under the same scoring that I talk about, mine will cost, will be actually less, will actually raise revenue. Theirs will actually cost $10 trillion. So $1 trillion a year out of the deficit, the plans that they proposed. Others have a variety, anywhere from $2 to $4 trillion in cost. So there are lots of plans out there. Some of them are good. Some of them grow the economy as much as mine, some a little less, some maybe a touch more. But no one in this field has the experience that I did. No one has come to Washington, D.C. as an outsider. Janet mentioned I was elected to Congress. What she didn't mention is I defeated a 14-year incumbent when I got elected the first time in a 60% Democratic district. And I was told when I got elected that they would eliminate my seat if I won. And they did. Because Pennsylvania, unlike Texas, is losing population relative to the rest of the country. And so my district got shipped off probably here to North Texas. Which is okay because you probably elected a conservative, so I'm good with it. So they put me in with a 28-year Democratic incumbent in a 70% Democratic district. And I won again. And then I ran for the United States Senate against a third Democratic incumbent. This is an incumbent United States Senator. This one, who was the author of Hillary Care. This was back in 1994. He was the sponsor of the Hillary Care bill, and his campaign was run by James Carville and Paul Begala, the Clinton team that just elected Bill Clinton 2 years earlier, and Bill and Hillary could have taken residency in my state, campaigning for him. And I won anyway. Why? Because the people of Pennsylvania, and Western Pennsylvania where I'm from, even though it was heavily Democrat, saw me go to Washington, and I kicked some things. We got a lot of things done. Principally because I never thought I was going to get reelected. So I never worried about it. My first race, I knew, I was going to get elected. I was going to lose my seat. The district I knew they were going to create was going to be impossible. So I just said, I got 2 years. I'm just going to do the right thing. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my political career. Because I realized that doing the right thing is also doing the best thing politically. And so my entire political career has been someone as an outsider that went there to try to shake things up. And we succeeded. There are a lot of people who go to Washington these days who scream and holler and are opposed to everything. Condemn, blame, say how corrupt everything is, and get absolutely nothing accomplished. Nothing accomplished. Lose every fight. We don't need people to tell us what's wrong. We need folks to tell us how to get what's right done. To lay out a vision for how we can bring this country together. And the plan I've talked about here is a plan that I believe will bring Democrats and Republicans together. There's a lot more to this plan. I have a white paper that you can go on our website and get. that lays out even more details. It's a plan that can get bipartisan support, and I know about that because I passed major pieces of legislation that I led the fight on. Probably the greatest piece of legislation that conservatives passed in the last 25 years was something called welfare reform, where we ended a federal entitlement. Not because we didn't like poor people, but we actually went out and made the case that aid to families with dependent children was hurting families and hurting children. That we needed to give flexibility to the states to be able to deal with people on a more personal basis and require work and put a time limit on welfare. Because again, back to the dignity of work and the power of earned success, the centrality of the family and trying to reknit and restore the American family. All of those things were essential in welfare reform. Well, I wrote the welfare reform bill when I was on the Ways and Means Committee in the House in 1993 and 4. When I came to the Senate, I managed that bill on the floor of the United States Senate as a first-year senator at 36 years of age, like 20 years younger than the next oldest person in the Senate. But I came there, and we had a message. I knew the material, and I had a message that connected. We had a Democratic president. We had not close to a filibuster-proof majority. I think the same number of senators that we have now. But we were able, after 2 presidential vetoes. Bill Clinton vetoed this bill twice, but I never gave up. We kept going back and compromising. You see, some people would stand up and say, he's wrong, and I'm right, and that's it, and let's go to election and have this. I'm not interested in winning the next election. I'm interested in getting this country back on the right track. And so instead of saying, we got our issue for the fall, which is what politicians do, leaders find good compromises. And I learned what a good compromise is. A good compromise is getting less of a good thing. A good compromise is getting less of a good thing. A bad compromise is negotiating less of a bad thing. Because a bad thing is still a bad thing, even though it's less bad. And those are compromises you don't make. You can make compromises of getting less of a good thing, if you can get a good thing done. And so we compromised 3 times. After first veto, after second veto, and then finally, before the first veto, then subsequent to those vetoes. And the president signed it. And guess what happened? Welfare rolls got cut in half. That's good. But if that's all that happened, and nothing else happened, then I would say that was a failure. But guess what else happened? Poverty levels went to their lowest levels ever, particularly among the chronically poor in America. Employment among the most hard to employ, never married mothers, went to the highest level ever in America. Radical changes, all for the better. The welfare rolls, I'm talking about TANF, which used to be aid to families with dependent children, are still lower now than they were 20 years ago, even in spite of the recession. Now, if you look at all the other welfare programs out there, they are higher now than they were at the height of the recession 5 years ago. Why? Because we have a government and a president and a party that measures success by how many people you put on welfare, not how many people you can get off welfare. And back to earned success. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a plan that will work to get this country growing. This is a plan that will work that will increase earned success. It's a plan that will work which will increase upward mobility. It's a plan that will work with putting free back in free enterprise for small businesses. And you have someone who can get it done. Someone who has a track record of working in a bipartisan way in a very horrible and divided town to make sure that we keep our eye on the ball. And that's helping everyone succeed in America. And with your help, we can make that happen. Thank you all very much, and I'll be happy to take your questions.